the first time we try it is when we try it, right? And when we are betting all those years of work and sacrifice in 7 minutes. That's why we call it 7 minutes of terror. One of the many reasons is that we haven't done it. Essentially, we actually do it.
The computer's done
it,
but you haven't.
Right, exactly. So then that's why we are so concerned that it's not going to work, because if we forgot a little piece of physics, we have a small error in that simulation that doesn't expose our mistake, then Mars will tell us about our mistake, and it's too late by then.
And I know that feeling when you work so hard on something and there's an element of luck to it or circumstance, but when it hits, it's the best feeling in the world.
We are humans after all, with emotions, and sometimes after we finish doing all that we can do with our brain, right, then the heart takes over, right, and it starts telling you things and making you lose sleep at night, and then you have to say, no, but wait a second, I know that this is the same as before, and we tested this, and and these guys did a tremendous job in there, and I trust them, and they worked really hard, and I saw them doing it. So then you the brain takes over again and tells the heart, we're going to be fine. But then when you land, it's all about the heart, right? It's not about the brain.
All right, welcome back to your next episode of Yang Speaks, the future of our limited series. I'm your co-host, Zach Grauman. I was Andrew's campaign manager, and now you're stuck with me diving into this limited series on our future. Today, guys and gals, we are talking about the future of space, and it's freaking awesome. So I hope you're excited, because you should be excited. We have someone who I don't think ever does any sort of public appearances, but he happened to be a fan of this movement and campaign, and took about an hour of his time to give us an inside scoop on the future of space. The man's name is Miguel San Martín. He's from Argentina originally, and he is an engineer at NASA. Works in he's lead engineer in the guidance control section at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, but he is mainly known, folks, for getting Mars rovers onto Mars, getting the rovers there. And he just got the Perseverance rover, which is the most recent rover we got onto the planet Mars. We talk about the future of space and how this all works with him. We talk about how the rover was built and what it does and what it's going to do when it's there and how you get it onto the planet. But we also talk about what this means. Is there life on Mars? What are we looking to find when we get there? Why are we doing this? What does the future of space look like? Guys, I learned a ton on this podcast. I don't normally ask for our guests like deep background, but in this case, I talk about his story, because his story and how he went from literally looking at the stars in Argentina to navigating the stars with the Mars rover in the United States is wild. You're going to learn a ton. I learned a ton. We're also going to talk about what is going on in the future of our humanity in the cosmos. Like, this is everything. I geeked out a little bit. So pardon me for being a bit of a fanboy, but I thought this was wild. It's so important. So tune in, guys. The future of space, only on Yang Speaks. Welcome back to Yang Speaks. Today we are talking about the future of space, and the goal for this episode is to blow everyone's mind, including my own. Today I am so excited. I want to welcome the amazing Miguel San Martín, who's an engineer at NASA, best known for his work. Right now he's the chief engineer for the guidance and control section at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, and had a lot to do with the latest mission to Mars and the Mars Perseverance rover. So Miguel, thank you for joining, sir. It's good to be with you.
Good to be with you too, Zach.
The first thing I learned about you is how fascinating your background is. So tell me a little bit about you and some of the how you got to be a NASA engineer.
Okay, well, I grew up in Argentina. I was actually I was born in a farm in the old-fashioned way in 1959. But my family lived in the farm. By the time I was born, we lived in Buenos Aires, but we spent all the vacations, summer vacations and winter vacations in the farm. And for me, that was always this was in the Patagonia. And it was always a place where I went to dream. I mean, we have a beautiful sky, at night. And my father was a civil engineer, and from where built roads in the late 30s in the Patagonia, and in order to navigate, they didn't have GPS, right? So they used the stars. So he had taken classes on how to use stars to navigate through the Patagonia. So he would teach me at night all the different constellations and the different stars. So I think that's a little bit where, my dream started. The other thing is that I was kind of born an engineer, I guess. I mean, it was out of my control. That's the way I was wired. At very early age, I loved everything that had electronics and mechanical things. And everything was, I would take apart everything and not always put it back together the way it was. And my father used to, encourage me all the time with these things. I would buy educational toys at a very early age. And this was the time of Apollo. So I grew up with Apollo. I was 10 years old when I saw Neil Armstrong walk on the moon, and that had I saw it live, and had a massive impact, right? And at that point is when I said, I knew I was going to be an engineer. I just didn't know what type of engineer I was going to be and apply to what, right? And that's when I started, maybe I can work on this, right? But the thing that sealed the deal for me was Viking. That was the first lander on Mars in 1976. And I also followed that mission very closely. Actually, it just happened that it was on the landing of Viking happens when we were at the farm. We used to go on the winter. We used to go for 2 weeks, and it was kind of where we would kill 2 pigs and then we would make the prosciutto and sausages, and which, by the way, I used to complain, right? But here we were, doing this primitive stuff where these other countries are going to Mars and
they're going to Mars, right?
Yeah. But in any case, I remember following the Viking project through the BBC at night and shortwave. And I remember the night where they said, well, all systems are go, everything is green. And, Viking is landing in a few hours, and good night. This is the end of the program, right? So I woke up in the next morning and went to the town to do the usual things that we bought, the bread for the day and the newspaper. And there in the newspaper was Viking footpad on the surface of Mars, right? And I said, this is what I want to do. That's it. I'm done. I figured it out.
How old were you then?
I was 16 years old. So my father at that point said, the only way that you're going to be able to fulfill your dreams is you need to go do your university studies in the United States. And that will, make it a little easier, perhaps, to get to NASA and do your things. So that's when I decided that I had to do that. So I finished high school, packed my bags, and I came with 0 plans. The only plans that I had when I left was to study English as a second language, to do the process of getting accepted in an American university. And Syracuse accepted me. So that was my entrance to a university. And I did my undergraduate in electrical engineering, and I did very well. I was summa cum laude, and then I applied to MIT, and they accepted me. So that's where I got my graduate degree in aeronautics and astronautics. And that opens the door to NASA, because essentially I study with professors that worked on the Apollo project.
Let's talk about when you first get to NASA. What are the first couple of things you started to work on? I feel like there's so many space projects that happen. I mean, look, we barely talk about the Mars rover, I guess is what's bothering me. And I'm sure there's so many cool things you've worked on that people are just unaware of. What did you get to do?
I arrived not in the best time to arrive, because they were working on a mission, a huge mission called Galileo that orbited Jupiter. So they were at the end of Galileo, development. And so I kind of missed the party, it was a little too late and there was nothing in the horizon at that point, right? So, but what I did is I started getting memos and learning about Galileo. So I learned, try to, all the experts were there. I mean, the world experts on this stuff. So I was trying to extract all the information that I could in preparation for when the big opportunity came in. I worked in a couple of missions. One it was actually an Earth orbiting mission to study the altitude of the oceans. And actually that mission, even though it didn't go to Mars, it was a pioneer in doing studies about the La Nina and El Nino currents, ocean currents. My first big break was Cassini. That was a huge mission to orbit Saturn. So that was really my first contribution on a product that actually was carried on the spacecraft. It was a piece of software, an algorithm to determine, guess what? I worked on a piece of software that determined the orientation of the vehicle relative to the stars. So I kind of like close circle with the way my father used to navigate in the Patagonia. So that was pretty cool. And so that was my big first break for me. And then right after that, actually we were in the middle of developing Cassini when my boss called me to his office and said, look, there is this new mission to go to Mars. It's called Mars Pathfinder. They don't have any money to do it. Some people think it's not going to work. It's going to use this airbag concept. So it was not going to like Viking, right? So that was kind of, a little bit a shock, because for me, Viking was everything, right? So what do you mean you don't want to land like Viking? No, it's too expensive, so we're going to use airbags. Okay, fine. You're still going to land on Mars. Viking, it was considered in the 70s the robotic equivalent of the Apollo project. Today, Viking would have been a $6 billion plus mission, right? So that it was that big, right? They had to invent everything. They had to, how to land on Mars. I mean, we're still using, pieces of the Viking, like the parachute design is still a Viking design for all our rover missions since then. So they have to actually develop computers for space, sophisticated computers to be able to land on Mars. So it was a soft lander. By soft lander, we mean the vehicle actually, enters in contact with the ground at a low velocity, lands on legs that have shock absorbers just to, to soften the impact of landing, right? But it comes out at very low speeds. But that requires very sophisticated navigation components and like a radar to compute the velocity of the vehicle relative to the ground, and engines that you can throttle. So you can, like the accelerator in your car, you can regulate the thrust and land softly. When Mars Pathfinder comes in, right, it was part of the faster, better, and cheaper mantra of NASA. They told us take more risks and make it much cheaper. So the thought was at that point that trying to do a soft lander like Viking would cost too much money because you have to develop all these, even though those things were invented, 20 years before, just resurrecting all that technology would cost so much money, we didn't have it. So my colleagues and friends now from mechanical engineering said, well, maybe instead of having all these complex and expensive navigation equipment, we can just land on an airbag and let it bounce. So that was the idea. So in some ways, try to minimize the use of the techniques that I'm an expert, right? Because I am, my area is about using sensors and actuators to control the vehicle, right? It was robust if you land on top of a rock, right? I mean, if you land with a legged lander on top of a rock, you can actually break the lander or topple it, right? I mean, ends up upside down. An airbag system is more robust to the uncertainty in the terrain, So that's what we did. And then that was the invention of the airbag landers system that then we use for speed and opportunity.
All right, it's COVID. And on personal level, I have been looking to talk to somebody to stay sane and stay happy. For me, I think just the isolation has been interfering with a lot of my professional or personal goals. Makes me a different type of person than I normally am. And for those of you who are struggling with that, I want to talk to you about BetterHelp, which is our sponsor here on Yang Speaks. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. So you can connect in a safe and private online environment. It's super convenient. I've liked it a lot. You can get professional counselors in depression and anger and stress and anxiety and relationships and sleeping and self-esteem and grief and you name it. It's available worldwide, which is really cool. You can kind of dive in on what would be helpful for you, what is needed for you, and what you're thinking. And you don't have to go into a public waiting room or anything like that. It's all confidential. So, got an offer for you. If you want to start living healthier, living a happier life today, as a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting our sponsor, betterhelp.com/yang. So join over 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health. Again, that's betterhelp, HELP.com/yang. Let's talk about going from point A to point B. How do you, in like layman's terms, like high level, because I know you specialize in like the navigation of these projects, but I think you have an interesting perspective, is how you go from Cape Canaveral or wherever we're launching from, NASA, to landing on a crater on Mars. And the simple analogy I was looking at was like, because the planets are orbiting both around the sun, it seemed like, imagine if you're a human being riding a merry-go-round and there was another merry-go-round that circled your merry-go-round and you were trying to toss an egg to somebody as you were moving, who's moving at a different speed, and then they had to catch it perfectly. Can you walk us through how you go from launching something here and to physically landing on Mars?
There are different technologies, but let's talk about the one that is the most common, right? Where it's very impulsive. It's actually, it is similar to what you're saying. So if you imagine you have a rock in your hand and then you have a moving platform, a car. It is kind of violent analogy, but let's just assume that I want to hit a moving car with a rock, right? So you will have to try to guess the velocity of the vehicle, because you need to throw it where the car is not going to be, right? And so you have to calculate how long the rock is going to get to where the vehicle is and where the vehicle is going to be by the time it arrives, right? So, but once that rock leaves my hand, I'm done, right? There's no way to correct it. So you have to do all your calculations by understanding where everything is and what velocity, right? So the equivalent of the rock is the launch vehicle. That lands in a rock, it takes a fraction of a second. In a launch, it takes minutes, maybe 10 minutes, right? But it's the same thing. That rocket is going to put you in a trajectory. It's going to throw you in a trajectory that at that point, Mars is not there. Actually, you're going to throw it such that at the right moment, Mars is going to run over you.
It's like a quarterback throwing to a receiver, right? You got to throw it where they're going.
Exactly. Yes, you have to, and he throws it where the guy is not, right? And except that the receiver is looking at the ball and he's trying to intercept, and Mars doesn't care.
Mars doesn't care.
There's
you got to hit the back of the head.
It's not trying to,
Right, yeah. So, they're just going to keep moving regardless. Good point.
So then where the analogy with throwing a rock breaks is that we actually do have the capability of from the ground, using actually the communication system of the vehicle, doubles as also a navigation measurement. So by making measurements, we can measure the distance and the velocity of the vehicle and also the angle of the vehicle and estimate the trajectory. So now we know, because when you throw the rock through, with the rocket, you don't do a perfect job. So, you try to, but you're quite not right? So we need to figure out where we are in the trajectory, and then we can make small adjustment to those trajectories. So we have, like in Perseverance, we have 5 opportunities, right, where we make, which are already pre-scheduled, before we launch, actually years before we launch, where we make those small corrections. The vehicle has a propulsive system on board that
I was
allows
going to
you
ask,
to make,
is it just air or gas that you're burning, or what? What changes the trajectory?
They are little rockets, and they're very simple. They are called it's a monopropellant propulsion system. It's just a single fuel hydrazine that when it gets in contact with this cat bed, that they call it, that it makes a chemical reaction that generates heat and gases, right? So that has a little nozzle, and then that pushes you around. So by opening the valves of that system, you create a force, right? And then you make that correction in the trajectory, and then you check out again to see whether now are we now in the right trajectory? No, we need another tweak, right? So we have 5 opportunities to do that during the flight, and slowly we are necking down on the trajectory. The Perseverance rovers, by the way, the navigation was so incredibly accurate that we didn't need the last 2 corrections.
Really?
So you only did three last. We only did 3.
And you were on point after the last 2. Why is it 5? Is it a resource perspective? Is it how much fuel or energy you have in the the rover itself? Why 5?
But I mean, it's an optimization. You want to try to minimize the fuel,
okay,
and then you want to maximize the accuracy of the delivery of the trajectory, and you try to keep it simple, right? I mean, every time that you do these maneuvers, it's an opportunity to screw up, right? And make
that's a good point. More things to go wrong. Yeah.
More things to go wrong. So we actually, for each one of these maneuvers, the reason why we didn't do the last 2, right, was because we have criteria to say, are we close enough? We don't have to be perfectly on the trajectory. So we have criteria that says, no, this is close enough. Therefore, yeah, we could make the maneuver and make it even better. But better, you could actually shoot yourself on the foot by deciding to do something that you didn't have to, and you may end up worse off, right? So then it's just very disciplined. We are always measuring risk, right? Risk against risk, right? Risk of not making the correction with risk of making the correction. I mean, there's a lot of money involved, right? We are billions of dollars, and then sacrifice.
Time. It takes 7 months, right? 7 months right now or so?
Yes. And it takes 6 to 8 years of sacrifice just to attempt one of these things, right? So imagine the sacrifice of all these people, their families, right? That evaporates because of a bad decision. So that's how we navigate. So, and also we not only we are concerned about the trajectory of the vehicle, but the orientation is very important because we have solar arrays, so they need to point towards the sun, and then the antenna needs to be pointed towards the earth. That's why we need this system that by looking at the sun direction and the stars can figure out its orientation. So if the stars is Canopus is there, Sirius is there, therefore Earth is in that direction. So that is that control of the orientation and the control of the translation. That's what we do during the trip to Mars. In addition to always checking that all the systems are working, and the systems that we're going to need for the landing are going to be ready to operate, and they are all calibrated. So those are the activities that we do during the cruise phase. That's what we call it, the trip from Earth to Mars.
So it starts on a rocket, and then the rover is still attached to some form of ship as it's in the cruise phase, right? Like it's still...
That's right. It's in an aeroshell, which is like a capsule, right? Because there are 3 phases of deceleration when we arrive to Mars. When we arrive to Mars at a 15,000 miles an hour, when we arrive to the upper layers of the atmosphere, and there are three stages of slowing down, right? The first stage is just simply this capsule enters the atmosphere, and just simply because it's wide and it has a large area, with the friction with the air, right, it slows down. Just like if in a car, if you're driving a car, don't do this, kids. But if you put your hand, you're gonna feel a resistance, right? That is pushing. It's just the drag of your hand through the flow of the wind, right? The same with that, but much higher velocities, and that friction generates a lot of heat. So you're exchanging kinetic energy, which is the energy of motion, with thermal energy, right? So you need a heat shield that can actually protect the spacecraft from that huge, 1,000 degrees of heating, right? So that's the first stage. 99% of all the energy, you lose it in that first stage. So then we open a parachute, a supersonic parachute, and we all know how parachute works. And that slows you even more, but you still, because the atmosphere of Mars is so tenuous, relatively, is only 1% density compared to Earth. So the parachute, so even with a nice big parachute, 21-meter parachute, you're still coming pretty fast, like 200 miles an hour, right? So you need a third phase, which is when you get rid of the parachute, and now you have these engines, and then propulsively you kill the rest of your velocity and you land softly, just like Viking did. All of this is totally automated, and there's too many minutes. It takes too long to send like 7 minutes.
Oh, so this is like time. This is because How long does it take for a message to get to the rover from Earth?
Yeah, about 7 minutes.
Okay, that's too long.
And 7 minutes back, right? So actually, when we get the telemetry that the thing is about to land, it actually it already landed. So we don't think that way.
You're celebrating 7 minutes later.
Exactly. But it's weird to think like, the dice have been tossed. It's just we don't know the answer yet. And so we are used to now thinking that reality is what we see, right? So we kind of not think about that other stuff.
All right, I want to talk about debt. On a personal level, I've had some debt. I had about 200 or so grand in student loan debt I had to pay off, and I got out of college. And then what happens if you have debt is you start to get other types of debt, including credit card debt. And I want to talk to you about Upstart, because Upstart is a fast and easy way to get a personal loan to pay off your debt all online. It's like a debt consolidator, and they use a better algorithm to figure out your actual credit score. So if you're doing credit cards or high interest debt or personal expense or student loan debt, all these things, over 500,000 people have used Upstart to get simple fixed monthly payments, which I like. You put it all in one place. They find smarter rates with trusted partners because they assess more on your credit score, because and I know that you're a lot more than just a freaking number. So they use a lot of different inputs, which makes your payment determination way more accurate. So find out how Upstart can lower your monthly payments today when you go to upstart.com/yang. That's upstart.com/yang. Don't forget to use our URL and let them know we sent you. Loan amounts will be determined based on your credit, income, and certain other information provided in your loan application. Go to upstart.com/yang.
How many times do you simulate this before? I'm assuming thousands, wherever it is, but how do those simulators work? And are you like practice landing in like the middle of a desert, or do you have I'm thinking like a movie studio, or you can like a big warehouse where you can adjust the atmosphere in there to test? How do you guys practice for this?
Okay, well, let me tell you what we don't do. What we can do, because it's too difficult, too expensive, and not worth it, is to try to exercise that whole sequence here on Earth. The conditions on Earth of atmosphere and gravity are so far off. We don't even
so it's
try.
Worthless.
It's worthless. It's expensive. So the best we do, right? The worst we can do, and what we do, is first of all, for each component of this system, we do tests, right? Like for example, for the parachute, we do a test that tries to mimic the conditions when we open the parachute as much as we can, right? To make sure that it's the right design and it's built properly too. And the same with the landing radar. We put the landing radar in a helicopter and we try to replicate the conditions that the radar is going to see on Mars. And we fly through the Mojave Desert, and there are different terrains, different velocities. And then we process the data from those tests, and we build mathematical models of that component. For each one of these components that we test separately, we build mathematical models. And then we put it in a simulation right? All those mathematical models, we put them together, and then we make the system land in a simulation, right? Where we model all the components, and also we had to model the Martian environment, like where we're landing, we're gonna get winds, and the atmosphere density is changing, right? And the places where we don't know exactly where things are, which is we don't know anything exactly, we actually statistically we add noise, we add errors that try to envelope the uncertainty and the error in each component. Like for example, the winds we don't know exactly, so we add a random component to the winds, and then we use a technique called Monte Carlo, which is from the casino. So it's after that, which essentially, because it's statistical, where we make the system land thousands, if not tens of thousands of times in the simulation. And then we look statistically which one landed properly and which one landed, failed, right? So statistically we can say, 9% of landed okay, but then you're good. And sometimes, no, here there are, we are only having success with 90%. Okay, what is that 10% that is not working? Do we have a deficiency on the simulation, or just simply the design is improper, so we need to go fix the design, and so that's what we use. That's the best we use. That's why we call it 7 minutes of terror. One of the many reasons is that we haven't done it. Essentially, we actually do it.
The computer's done
do
it, but you haven't.
Right, exactly. So then that's why we are so concerned that it's not going to work, because if we forgot a little piece of physics, we have a small error in that simulation that doesn't expose our mistake, then Mars will tell us about our mistake, and it's too late by then, right? So so that's why it's so unnerving. It's just the fact that we the first time we try it is when we try it, right? And when we are betting all those years of work and sacrifice in 7 minutes.
And I know that feeling when you work so hard on something and there's an element of luck to it or circumstance, but when it hits, it's the best feeling in the world. Have you worked on projects that have gone the other way?
I was never involved in working in it. I've always, I've been consultant in one of them, I guess, that did not work. But all the ones that I worked on have worked. So I've been successful. And it's actually kind of, I'm trying to still explain to myself why. I was very nervous the day of the landing, and it had nothing to do in terms of not trusting the engineers working on it in this one. Some of them, my friends, and had tremendous respect for them. But I was very nervous. And maybe it's because there are many reasons. Maybe one was simply, we just been so lucky. We've been very successful landing these rovers. Is our luck going to run out at some point? I know it's not a very scientific way of thinking, right? But we are humans after all, with emotions, and sometimes after we finish doing all that we can do with our brain, right, then the heart takes over, right, and it starts telling you things and making you lose sleep at night, and then you have to say, no, but wait a second, I know that this is the same as before, and we tested this, and and these guys did a tremendous job in there, and I trust them, and they worked really hard, and I saw them doing it. So then you kind of, the brain takes over again and tells the heart, we're going to be fine. But then when you land, it's all about the heart, right? It's not about the brain.
It's a room of emotional scientists and engineers, which I love. I think that's what's so, endearing about it, frankly. Let me back up. Like, what is the purpose of the Perseverance rover, which just landed in February 18th of 2021, just a couple weeks ago? What's the end goal for NASA and for us to get from this rover on Mars?
All of these missions have multiple goals, but there are some main goals. The main goal here is in the previous rovers, right, from Pathfinder to Curiosity, they're all associated with the goal of determining whether there was life on Mars 3.5 billion years ago, 4 billion years ago, when the conditions of Mars were very different. It was they had an atmosphere. It was have oceans and lakes, and and it was a warm planet, and very similar to the same to the conditions of Earth at that time, where on Earth life was starting, right? So the question is, well, if the conditions were there, then there is a chance that life actually also originated on Mars at the same time. Then Mars changed, right? Lost its atmosphere, became very dry and cold, right? And but the question is, during that time, did life, originated on Mars? And that's a question, a very important question that the scientists, not just the scientists, but, right? I mean, the philosophers, everybody wants to know whether we are alone in the universe. Is life just a pure terrestrial phenomena, right? And that's it, right? I mean, it's a very difficult. The conditions have to be perfect, incredible, and only happens in the whole universe. Only happen on Earth, right? It's probably unlikely that that's the case. But it would be awesome to prove that that's not the case, just by showing within our solar system that life actually took hold in more than one place, right? So that's why we're interested on Mars. Now, the previous missions, after Curiosity, the main objective was not detecting life itself. It didn't have the capability, the instruments to do that, but to detect whether the conditions for life to originate on Mars happen in the distant past, right? So one of them was finding water that stayed
which it did,
liquid
right?
state,
and found evidence that water did exist, right?
And they checked, water exists, right pH, so not too salty, not too acidic.
Wow,
perfect for life, and it lasted millions of years, which is time is always important in the recipe of life. All of the things were there. So now with Perseverance, we need to go answer it's time to answer the final question. Okay, cool. But was there a life or not, right? And Perseverance is going to try to do that in two ways. One, it has instruments on board, more sophisticated instruments that work in a different way than the previous, to look for, they call it biosignatures, which are, again, to non-expert like me, they are indirect evidence that of minerals and the way they were deposited, that were the action, most likely, the action of biological, processes, right? So that's what we call biosignatures. Detecting life on Mars is very difficult, right? But trying to find biosignatures, it's the best we can do at this point.
Why is detecting life so difficult there?
It's life itself. The definition of life is difficult, and it's not. It seems that it's not. And it's not an easy. It's controversial thing, right? So the best way and also because being able to say there was life on Mars, or be able to say we know a place that there was life that is not Earth, is such a huge statement that the amount of proof you need is overwhelming, right? So the second way that Perseverance is going to help is it's going to take these samples of soil and and rock, encapsulate them in these cylinders, and seal them, such that another mission that we are working on it, called Mars Sample Return, is going to take these samples and bring them back to Earth. Now, here on Earth, we have all the instruments, sophisticated instruments. We can make the measurements, argue the scientists with, and now you can have, we feel that if there was life, fossils in those samples, we'll be able to come up with a scientific consensus, right? And try to bringing those instruments to Mars is very, very difficult. It's much easier to bring a piece of Mars to the instruments on Earth. So that's the second way that Perseverance is going to help answer this question.
Are you unhappy with your smile? You no longer have to be, because thousands of people have used Candid, the clear, comfortable, removable, and practically invisible aligners to straighten your teeth. And now people love their smile. Seriously, they sent me these testimonials of real people with their actual stories. So Justin in Georgia was like, hey, I used to have a gap in my front and the side, and then people were staring at my mouth all the time. And now Candid was a perfect company for me, because you can't stop me from smiling now. It's pretty cool how much a smile goes a long way. And Candid is a pretty awesome company. They basically pair you with a licensed orthodontist who's an expert in tooth movement, and you have the same orthodontist who created your plan from start to finish. So you never have to wonder how you're doing. You get paired with one, and it's just 6 months. You'll start seeing results way before then, and it's thousands of dollars less than traditional braces. So here's the deal. Become your best you with your best smile. Start straightening your teeth today. Right now, you can save $75 on Candid Starter Kit. Go to candidco.com/Yang and use the code Yang. That's candidco.com/Yang. Use the code Yang. Take advantage of this limited time offer and save $75 on your starter kit. candidco.com/Yang. Code Yang.
I watched a lot of the videos of this thing that at least the public videos from NASA, and the bells and whistles on this rover are pretty remarkable. Where there's it's got microphones, so we get sound from Mars for the first time. It can drive itself. It's got a helicopter on it to travel further if it needs to. It can drill in, get samples, and then you're gonna propel them up to another rocket ship at some point to send them home. What else? So what, like in that context, like please tell me more what this thing can do, but also what is it going to be? I know it landed in a crater. Like what is it going to be doing for the next number of, I guess however long it's going to be there, number of years, I guess.
Another interesting contribution that Perseverance is going to do is it carries an instrument that is going to take the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and extract the oxygen. Okay, and that is just to prove the concept that we can actually generate oxygen from the Mars atmosphere for astronauts in the future and for breathing, but also it's part of the fuel, to come back home. So that's going to be an experiment, and also, as you mentioned, it's going to have a helicopter, which is also an experiment. It's not part of the main scientific goal of the mission, but it's, once in a while, we like to do experiments to enable future missions, right? That then will be dedicated to using a helicopter for scientific purposes. Flying a helicopter on Mars is very challenging because of what I just told you before, that the atmosphere of Mars has a density of only 1%. So a lot of people thought it was impossible, but an engineer did the calculations that you can. It's not simple. It's really hard, and adapting all the equations and all the dynamics of helicopters to the Martian conditions was a fantastic job done by a bunch of, very talented engineers at JPL and around the nation. And so that's going to prove that the idea is to prove that concept, right? So then in the future, we can design missions around that. So, and as far as, the activities, why they picked that place, right? Jezero Crater is because, like we said before, water is important for life, and they believe that in that crater there was a river, again billions of years ago that brought waters into that lake, and in the process carry with it sediments that accumulated and form a delta, right? And that delta that you can actually see in the pictures, right? And could contain they're very good. The materials, the geology of deltas and the materials are very good at preserving evidence of life, if there was life, right? So it's a perfect place to go take these samples, right? And increase the probabilities that the sample contains that evidence, those fossils of life, when we bring them back home.
They've said that the samples should be ideally back to Earth by 2031, so we got a ways to go. How long is Perseverance, the rover, expected to be there? And do you just keep it there forever until there's a storm or something that wipes it out? Or is there a finite end date?
All our missions, right, when we negotiate the mission with NASA, right, or we define it, let's not use that word negotiate, when we define the mission, NASA says this mission in the approval process, right, there are objectives, scientific objectives, and engineering objectives, and one of them is the duration of the mission to be worth doing, right? And in this case is one Martian year, which is about 2 Earth years. They feel that in that time they can fulfill all the scientific objectives. Now, for us engineers, that means that we need to design a vehicle that lasts at least years, but usually lasts for much longer, right? So the Spirit and Opportunity rovers were designed to last 3 months. That's what was required of us. And they lasted many, many, many years. I think Opportunity, I think it lasted like 10 years. So chances are that curiosity and perseverance, unless there is a major catastrophe that we not anticipate, they should last, hopefully a decade, right? But again, in order to be able to call the mission a success, 100% success, it needs to last 2 Earth years approximately.
What does it start to look like? Like, let's talk about the future a little bit, in the sense that, let's say we do find like absolute proof that there's life on Mars, right? Like we find fossils, you find evidence of conditions that were like, objectively, this is where, there was green grass here and whatever it is. How does that affect NASA? How does that affect your funding? What do you think the world starts to think of your work if that happens?
Well, I mean, it would be a tremendous news, by the way. I think it would be one of the, people would study in the books, right? This is the first time, 1,000 years from now, right? People will be reading books, studying books and saying, this is the mission that made it happen, right? I mean, it would be documented in history, right? And the same way the first time men walked on the moon, right? So it would be, I think it would be that big. I think that there was still going to be a lot of answers, right? A lot of things that they're going to, again, this is beyond my field of expertise by a lot, but I would imagine that we'll try to see, okay, it's life, and was it similar to Earth? I mean, is it DNA? I'm not sure that they will be able to answer those questions, but they're going to try to, I imagine, to try to pin it down. And, but, studying astrobiology, which is the science of understanding whether life happened anywhere outside Earth, is no one end up there, right? I mean, the other question, for example, I mean, some people believe that this life, let's say that there was life on Mars 3.5 billion years ago, chances is that on the surface, you're going to find fossils, right? Because it's very, very hostile environment, the surface of Mars, with the radiations. There's some chemistry in the surface that is practically sterilizing, kills it, right? But some people think that life could have adapted and now is in the subsurface. So it's possible there might be life there. So then there would be missions to now try to drill, and you have to drill for hundreds of meters, right? And to actually test the hypothesis, right? So that would be a brand new, set of missions that you could do that. Also, I mean, there are other places on our solar system to study life, and for example, Europa, which is a moon of Jupiter, that below an ice crust there is a liquid ocean. So there's actually liquid water today on Europa. So it's possible that in those liquid oceans you might have life, and maybe it could be even more advanced than just microbes, right? So there's plenty of being able to check and say, yes, life happened somewhere else. There's still a lot of research that you can continue doing. And NASA is not all about finding life elsewhere, right? We want to understand how the solar system formed, right? And the different galaxies. So we have plenty. We just started, right? I mean, we still have a lot of things to answer about the universe.
In your opinion, like, how far away are we from sending humans to Mars, or humans to, bringing manned missions to some of these places?
It's a good question. I don't know exactly. I mean, NASA's plans right now is to go back to the moon, right? I mean, in this decade. I mean, the original plan under the previous administration was 2024. Go back with astronauts, the first woman on the moon by 24. Probably that they get moved towards the future, but hopefully still within the short term. And the idea is now to go back to the moon and not do what Apollo did, just putting the flag and footprints and take a few pictures and come back. I mean, they did a fantastic job. They did some science too, but the Apollo project was more of a Cold War political,
right. National pride
contest,
yeah.
Right? So the idea now is to go back to the moon and stay, and not only stay, but also learn to live of the of the resources in the moon, right? The moon has, in the poles has ice, right, in the South Pole. So the idea is to have access to that ice to convert that into oxygen and fuel. I mean, and separating hydrogen and oxygen, you make fuel. And so because the idea is when we go to Mars, we're going to have to use those techniques, right? And the best thing would be to exercise living off the land on the moon before we actually attempt to go to the Mars, where we're going to have to. It's so expensive to bring cargo to Mars, so that if you have to bring your fuel from your return fuel, you have to bring it from Earth, right? It makes it very difficult. So it would be better to actually, like it's illustrated in the movie The Martian, they illustrate it very well, right? That you actually send a factory of fuel ahead of time, and you only send the astronauts, right, later when the module for return with fueled up is ready to come back. So that's kind of the plan. But the idea, NASA is first to do it on the moon. But, there is like other companies like SpaceX that they feel that they can do that much sooner. As for NASA, we're talking about end of the next decade. Elon Musk wants to do it sooner, and I hope the sooner the better, but for all of us, right? But it is a very difficult problem, right? It's putting humans on the surface of Mars and return them safely it's tens, if not hundreds of times more difficult to do it on the moon. So that's what we also, because we haven't done it.
How have SpaceX and whatever Jeff Bezos' company, how are these some of private attempts at being NASA? Yeah, how have they changed the way you guys operate? Have they made your life easier, better, more complicated? How's that dynamic on your end?
People think that NASA competes with them, and they don't realize that that's not the case. On the contrary, we have a relationship where we help each other in some ways, right? It's a symbiotic relationship, and we want them to succeed. Like for example, the commercial cargo and commercial crew program to carry provisions to the space station and astronauts, right? That's something that NASA started, right? And have this public-private partnership with, for example, with SpaceX, and now for crew Boeing, and to try to reduce the cost of doing that. And that has been a tremendous success, right? It has been such a huge success that now they're applying the same formula, right, to the human landing system, which is the part of the Artemis program, right, that brings the astronauts from Orion, which will be in orbit around the moon, to the surface and back, right? So that is being developed, that program, using the same type of relationship with the private sectors that they are using to bring material and astronauts to the space station, where these private companies actually they render a service for NASA, right? So NASA doesn't take possession of the machine. It's almost like you're paying for, I'm going to pay you to put these astronauts on the surface and then bring them back to Orion.
And they can do it cheaper, theoretically, or in partnership, right?
Exactly. And actually, they can sell that service to other people. And actually, they are required, these companies, to also make their own investment in this, right? Because they want to own the intellectual property. So also to put some skin in the game, right? So you want them to put skin in the game. So it's a new way of doing things where we all win, right? It's not like NASA, this is fun. This is what we want. We want also the price, the cost of the launch vehicles to come down, because our missions, we contract out to the private sector our launch vehicle, the rockets that get us in our way. The cheaper those rockets are, right, the more missions we can do, right? So it's all good. I mean, it's exactly, and actually, we in NASA we try to facilitate as much, that our intellectual property we develop within NASA, that we transfer that to the private sector. That's what we do. That's what we actually like doing.
I love that. So what What scares you? Does anything scare you about where this could be going? Like anything that kind of keeps you up at night about the future of space or the future of Mars exploration?
This reducing the cost, right? I mean, sometimes it's not that you take more risk, but you need to be very clever at cutting the things that are not useful, right? That are adding bureaucracy but not safety, right? So you have to do surgery, cut the fat but don't cut the muscle, sort of thing. And is it possible that we overdo it, right? And we have an accident, right? And that could throw some cold water on the whole thing, right? And so we have to be very careful, right? I mean, it's good to reduce the cost, but we should make sure that we don't try to do so much that we compromise safety. No, NASA is all over it. They're managing that, right? But that's the tricky part.
NASA to me is one of few government organizations we have that actually is forward looking, which means by definition, it's optimistic. We're investing in our future. What is exciting you 10, 20 years from now? What would be the perfect outcome? What would get you really excited about the future space?
First of all, I would love to see humans on the moon again, right? We waited so long for that, right? So that is, I'm looking forward to that. And I'm looking forward to bringing those samples back from Mars, right? I mean, that's going to be fantastic. Imagine, seeing this piece of Mars that was brought up with all these machines, all these robotic machines. And we've been working and talking about this for decades, right? And so that excites me a lot. And there are so many missions, as I mentioned before, this Europa mission, to put a package of scientific instruments on the surface of Europa is super exciting. And we would like to do a mission like that. We're waiting to see what are the priorities in NASA. There's a process where they choose the priorities for the future missions. And I'm hoping that that's one of them. I think that it would be a very cool place to go visit. Imagine landing in a foreign place like that, right? The more places we land, because I think that we as humans, we like to project us, right? In the surface of Mars or in the surface of the moon or the surface of Europa. What would, if we were standing there and we looked around, what it would look like, right? So I think that there's still a lot of that to do and explore, and it's very exciting to see so many young kids now getting into this, right? I mean, when you go visit the SpaceX plant, in Hawthorne here, and they're all young, and it's fantastic. I mean, I think that we're going through a great period of space exploration, and there are more players. There are other countries too that are also, expanding their activities, and so there's a lot of finally, I think we're seeing the explosion that we wanted to see a few decades ago is happening, and it's kind of like it taking its own life, right? That's the thing that is exciting. It's no longer the big governments that have to be pushing and putting money. It feels like finally we lit a fire and the fire is just going, right? And that's all good.
I think about that a lot. How many little boys and girls watched your video of it landing, or have looked at Elon Musk and what SpaceX is doing, or even Jeff and Blue Origin, and say, I want to do that. I want to get involved in that. And that is the best part of this future. So here's what we'll do, Miguel. In 10 years, I'll bring you back. We'll be back on. You can tell me, hopefully they will give you a space rock from Mars. I hope they do that, or a moon rock or something.
I don't think so.
I know, I'm sure they won't, but maybe after they've done all their tests, maybe they'll distribute it up to the people that have earned it. You would have earned it, sir.
I will be happy with a grain, just a little.
Okay, you'll give me a grain, just a little,
just a little grain,
a sliver, some Mars dust. But look, Miguel, I can't tell you how much on a personal level. I think you're a real life superhero. There are people like you doing work that, in many ways, is unsung and it's unknown. It's behind the scenes, but without you and your colleagues, I know there's a lot of people in your team.
It is a team sport, let me tell you. This is a team sport. I mean, there's only sometimes there are faces like, mine lately because of the the silly TikTok that my daughter put. But whatever works, if it is good to inspire new generations and unite us in these difficult times that we're living these days.
It's true. You were a source of hope for me. I hope you're a source of hope and inspiration for a lot of people listening. So Miguel, congrats. Thank you. Keep us posted on what you find. If you find aliens, you have my email. You just let me know. I won't go public.
I think you'll find out.